Like, imagine if you had a gremlin inside you that would just randomly write automations that were harmful because it was trying to protect you from things that it no longer that were no longer actually bad. Like that's unaddressed trauma is a gremlin that's literally doing that. And I'm not going to touch anything.
Yep. Welcome to a new episode of the DefDevice Podcast. My special guest today is Mr. Will Christensen. Welcome, Will.
Hey, it is good to be here.
You will see later why we're having so much fun here, because there have been some technical issues. You can check it in the bloopers section later. But for now, let's get serious here. So, Will, what are you doing these days?
So I am an owner in SellerLabs, and that's a long story. The short version of the long story is I moved from Utah here in the U.S. to Georgia here in the U.S., not Georgia the country, Georgia the state here in the U.S. And I moved there to go work for a company called BookScouter, which is the first company that Brandon Checketts, who's the founder of SellerLabs, it's the first company he actually made grow into something big. That's how he became an Amazon seller. He was selling warehouses full of used textbooks. They would go buy pallets of books from like Lost in the Mail, pallets of books, and then they would go in and scan them all and sell them. And Amazon was one of the places they would go sell all of those books. And they did mixed media and all sorts of other crazy crap. Well, Brandon is a coder at heart. And he was constantly fascinated with how can I automate some of these parts and processes. And right when reviews became like, okay, reviews are king, he wrote the first version of Feedback Genius in a weekend. Like just, randomly, he was like, I think I'm going to automate this feedback thing. There wasn't even an API. Like he built like a scraper that would essentially go in and get all the information and then email them, because it used to be that's how you would do it, is you would send an email to that like fake email address, and then that's how Amazon was obfuscating all of the email addresses. Anyway, he automated that process for himself, turned it into a product, and it was the first product that put SellerLabs on the map. So still to this day, a vast section of revenue for SellerLabs is associated with that Feedback Genius tool. It's since been rewritten and iterated upon and all of that, but Brandon was doing that. I came out and was working with him when SellerLabs was kind of in its full stride, and I pitched him on creating Data Automation, which is an automation company, still an advisor and an owner in that company, but it's now being run by another team member who's the CEO. She's doing a great job. So if you need any e-commerce integrations, those guys are amazing. Inventory, syncing, tracking information, order information, passed back and forth between different systems. They're hard to match. Great customer service, and the team knows what they're doing. Outside of SellerLabs, and my main responsibility at SellerLabs now, I'm an owner, but my main responsibility is the podcast. And that's actually obviously how you and I met, was I invited you to jump on that podcast. And then by day, I run around and clone entrepreneurs all day long as Entrepreneur's Apprentice founder. So I'm involved in all sorts of crazy stuff.
Wow. See, again, I learned a lot about your what you're doing at SellerLabs and how you got to work with them. But I think Entrepreneur's Apprentice is another venture that is definitely worth explaining a little bit further. So what you do there is pretty unique. I experienced it firsthand. So maybe you just give us a quick insight into that one.
So the big thing here is, as an entrepreneur, I constantly wanted a clone. I wanted somebody who could do things that only I seemed to be able to do. I would pass off a task to a VA. The VA would come back to me and they'd ask me a question, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, if you just typed that exact question into Google, you would have figured that out. And I got frustrated with not being able to find talent or people who cared about it as much as me. It seemed like I was the only one who cared, and I had these tasks that kind of ranged in terms of what was important. So I had tasks on one end of the spectrum that were like super high level, very difficult COO kind of tasks, right? Like things that only I could do. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I had the VA tasks that I could hand off. And there came a point at which I couldn't get the VA to do any more. So I was like, okay, well, that's great, but there's a whole bunch of admin-y kind of tasks right here that are above the VA but below the COO. And it was like, who the fetch is supposed to do that stuff? I guess it's me. And so I ended up doing a whole bunch of stuff that I was like, this is not rocket science. Like filing for licenses for businesses. You don't have to know how to do that. You have to read the page and fill it out. Like there's just a lot of figure it out kind of stuff that I was so frustrated that I couldn't hand to somebody else. And so I went in search of a clone. Found out cloning technology was not a really good option for, cloning yourself. I think that's illegal. I'm sure it's illegal somewhere. I then thought, wait, what about a time machine? And because I'm like out there now, right? Imagining what this could be like. And that actually led me to the idea of, wait a minute, maybe there is somebody in college right now who could be, I need me in college. I was like, that's what I really want. I want me in college. And that, oh wait, there are people in college right now. Let's give them a personality test and see what happens. So I brought a guy in and I was like, dude, you're me in like 10 years. Like let's join forces and rule the universe. You're literally within 1 point of me in my personality. And the kid goes, I don't need you. And I was like, excuse me? What do you mean you don't need me? And he was like, I don't need you. And I was like, dang, I think I was just that arrogant when I was in college. Like it dawned on me like, oh, maybe I don't want. And I wish I could say like at that moment I had an epiphany. Like you need your opposite when you're finding an apprentice. I was not that smart. I continued to hire people who were just like me and failed. This is like 3 years ago. The first 4 or 5 apprentices were like 3-month done and wonders. Like they'd come in and leave me high and dry. And it was like, well, crap, I just got you to the point where you were valuable to me. And now you're off doing your own thing, which is a concern a lot of entrepreneurs have. Well, one who came to work for me for free was sticking around. So I gave him the paying job. He stuck around. He's now the head of marketing at SellerLabs. So he's gone from apprentice to head of marketing at SellerLabs under my tutelage, right? So I trained him to get in and figure out that. And now he's teaching himself a whole bunch of stuff to, dig in and figure all of that stuff out. He is my exact opposite in every way, shape, and form. And so I figured out, if you're trying to bring someone on in a business, so this is a hack. If you're going to hire a VA, if you're going to hire anybody to come in and work with you, you want your opposite. You want someone who's going to complement you, someone whose strengths match your weaknesses and vice versa. So if you're familiar with EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System, if you're a visionary, you'd better find an integrator, and vice versa. If you're an integrator, you'd better find a visionary and lean on those weaknesses and strengths.
That is very fascinating. And yeah, we had this conversation, and I mean that you actually have to find your opposite. I think that is such a piece of wisdom right here, which I mean, I don't know anyone who has talked about this kind of stuff the way you do. So I think it's really inspiring. And I think every entrepreneur would agree that finding, the people who complement us and who can scale our business is one of the most important things we need to do. Otherwise, we're just a one-man show, and it never goes very far to be a one-man show. And I mean, and of course, we also end up in burnout and other unpleasant situations. Yeah, cool. So, which makes me even more curious about young Will. Let's do the little time travel thing, which you already mentioned, the time machine. You're familiar with it. So let's go and get to know 10-year-old Will. What was he
So
about?
I've officially decided you need some sort of really cool sound effect for the time machine part of this episode,
All
where it's
right.
like the Twilight Zone, like, and
I agree.
now we're 28 years, because I'm 38 years old. You're 28 years in the past. It's funny that you mentioned 10 years old, because at 10 years old, the most pivotal thing that could have happened did happen to Will Christensen. I actually lost my mom to breast cancer at 10. Actually, it was March 4th, 1996. And it was literally a month and a couple of days before my birthday, turning 10. And um, one thing I would say to anyone who has lost a parent, and especially a mother, um, there is a core part of your personality, of your identity, that is attached to your parents. And the part that had been built up to that point, as well as all the parts that were being built after that, pivoted around this trauma. And I don't call it trauma to name it as bad, or to say, holy crap, like, I can't believe this happened to me. But I do call it trauma because trauma helps me recognize that this is something that is maybe a little bigger than I can handle on my own. Um, and I dove in head first into creation and self-esteem issues and all sorts of interesting things that came with that. And I actually took away from high school, from junior high and high school, this idea that I had to be a billionaire. I wasn't a billionaire, because so I still have. This is funny. Um, I just had my 20-year high school reunion, and I didn't go. Um, and I was like, I don't really want to go. And I think part of the reason I didn't go is because I'm not a billionaire yet. So I really want to pull up in a Lamborghini, or like the freaking ripped out, most amazing Tesla, like the $400,000 Tesla. Like, that's what I want to pull up in. I'm not quite to that level yet. So I still drive a Prius. I mean, does that make sense? Like and it's funny because cars are not something that I'm like super into, and so maybe I'll have to rent one to drive up to, but I want to at least like have, like, I could afford one, right? Like, I'm not just renting one to rent one. I'm like no, like I don't drive a Tesla, but it's because I don't want to, not because I can't. And I think I kind of took that on. Like, I have to be a billionaire in order to make it in life.
So not just a millionaire, a billionaire.
Oh yeah, I told my wife. So my wife and I are dating, and she's like, "So, what do you want to do, like, when you grow up?" And I was like, "I want to be a billionaire." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "I'm gonna be a billionaire." I tied my identity to this idea of being a billionaire, and I believe the reason I did that is because I was trying to fill this ginormous hole in my self-worth from the wound, of just 10 years old. And I actually have to take my hat off. God was very kind. 2 years after my mom passed away, my dad remarried. And my second mother, I don't call her a stepmom, joined the family. And she adopted us from a standpoint of just pure motherly love. And I'm so grateful that she was there, because I can only, if I'm facing some of the trauma I'm facing right now with her in my life, without her in my life, I'd probably be in a penitentiary somewhere. Like from a standpoint of how much impact a mother has, unreal. So it's just amazing, what's out there. But for me, trauma has played a significant role in from 10-year-old to now in my journey.
Yeah, man, that is a very touching story. Yeah, and I can only imagine what it's like to lose your mom at this young age. Yeah, it's definitely a trauma, and it definitely has changed the way of your life. But obviously, there was also some good on this path and support and some
Mm-hmm.
luck, I would hope,
Yep.
and stuff that made you become the amazing guy you are today. So uh,
I think there's something to be said there, Dano. Like part of and I was ingenuity dude from day one. My dad still tells the story of me, like making a diagram of this truck that would reach behind the house and suck the garbage out of the garbage can. Like I made a diagram. I'm like 10 years old or something. Oh, I was probably younger than 10. You know, making this diagram. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm making a diagram of a truck that makes it so I don't have to take the trash cans to the curb ever again." Like I was like designing. So this idea of creating something from nothing, that started well before I lost my mom. But cementing my self-worth, digging into that, I chased it. And honestly, I chased it unhealthily. I chased it out of fear, out of trying to compensate for who I am. And I'll tell you what, Dano, no faster way to lose a company than to build it based off of a foundation of emotional trauma. And so, data automation, I actually built the team up to 18 people, amazing people. Like, love every single one of those guys. If anybody any of them are listening to this episode, I would love to have a phone call and hear where they're at in their lives. And frankly, I want to apologize because I walked into the role of leader not understanding what my own emotional stuff was going to bring to my ability to lead. I didn't understand what I didn't know, right? I mean, how do you don't know what you don't know. But some of the ways that I treated people, like I had people who would want to quit and I immediately freaked out. Like if they wanted to quit, I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're abandoning me." Well, that wasn't about them. It was about my mom. But I didn't put that together until, you know, years after the whole thing kind of crumbled and we put it back together and connected all of those dots. And so I would say for me, biggest takeaway is get your crap in order. Like if you're gonna go be an entrepreneur and you're gonna go lead other people and you're gonna go make their livelihoods dependent upon you and your skills and growing a company, there is no faster way to let it crumble than to let your own self-doubt, idiosyncrasies, and trauma affect your ability to lead.
Oh yeah, man. So we are already right into the words of wisdom, and I couldn't agree more that this is essential. And an entrepreneurial journey is something about self-help. I mean, there is a part in it where we just have to understand what makes us go, what makes us think a certain way, feel a certain way. So yeah, get your crap together. I think that's the one sentence to summarize what we need to do, and it's not as easy as it sounds, because this crap can be a huge pile, man.
The
And it
first
can,
step,
and
the first step is vulnerability. The first step is opening up to someone who cares about you and talking about it. That is the that is the first step to addressing trauma is recognizing, yeah, this crap happened to me and it was hard, and we're going to grow and we're going to learn, and it's going to be okay. And the only way you can begin that process is beginning with vulnerability. And then I could not recommend more emotional literacy retreats. That's where I started. I was too scared of. I tried some different counselors in different parts of my life, and it helped a lot. But it really didn't start to really shift or change for me until I started doing EMDR, which is a form of therapy that does like rapid eye movement decentralization. So like you basically rewrite neural pathways in your brain around trauma. I've done 3 years of that, and I am a totally different person to who I was 3 years ago. Which is part of why, that apology that I mentioned before, like, I wish that I could undo some of the damage that I did in terms of, how I led incorrectly. But I'm not attached to that anymore. There was a part of me that was like so bent out of shape about all those past relationships, and now it's like, yeah, we learn. Like it's uh it's a hard lesson, but we grow, we learn. And yeah, could not recommend more becoming more emotionally literate, and dealing with your stuff.
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. And I would love to dive deep into this kind of therapy thing that you did, but yeah, maybe that would be leading a bit too far. This is not about self healing, really. But yeah, I mean, you're
You're welcome
welcome.
to
You're
ask me
welcome to
any
share. Yeah,
question you
yeah,
want there.
yeah, man. I mean, come on. If I'm curious, you said something rapid eye movement and stuff, so maybe you can just give our
Yeah,
listeners
yeah, yeah.
like a
So
quick summary, like how did healing trauma work for you?
yeah, sure. So trauma is our body keeping score. So if a bear attacks your family, that's a very high stress situation, right? Um, from then on out, anytime, and let's imagine it happened in the woods. Anytime you're in the woods, your body's going to be like, "Oh shiz, we're in the woods. A bear is going to eat us." And you could be like, "There aren't any bears here. We're not actually in a place where there are bears." And your body's like, "Yeah, no, we're going to get eaten." So our adrenaline is high, our fear is high, and we're on red alert. Let's say that like it was done, like you got attacked in the middle of a campfire. Any campfire, the smell is going to trigger that. And that's an easy thing for us to recognize because it's like, oh yeah, if you get attacked by a bear. But my earliest trauma was looking over the bassinet at my newborn baby brother. I discovered a 2-year-old memory. And then I remember what I didn't remember, I had repressed this, was looking up at my mom and seeing how much she loved that little brother. And I was like, it's never going to be the same. Like, there's no way she could love me as much as she used to. And so I took on this belief of I'm unlovable. What trauma therapy does, it is allows you to take I'm unlovable, which is essentially a coded subroutine. So if you think about automation in business, every time an email comes in, we automatically do X, Y, and Z. Well, if I'm carrying around I'm unlovable, anytime someone reaches out to me to get vulnerable, I put up a hand. Nope, nope, I'm unlovable. Don't touch me. It's a defense mechanism. But if I can learn to rewrite that subroutine, which um, EMDR uses bilateral tapping, so think like tapping on both sides of the brain, or rapid eye movement, right to left. And with a trained therapist, you relive those experiences, but you do it with the consciousness of your adult self helping guide the process. And I invite God into the process as well. And we heal because now when I go back to that memory of my mom, I have a memory of us standing in front of the coffin, the four kids, and we're just standing there, and they're closing the lid, and that memory used to haunt me. It doesn't haunt me anymore. In fact, after the therapy, I now have a mental image of my mom, in the spirit world, that kind of thing, like hugging us while we're watching so she's not actually in that coffin. She's standing behind us. And in my mind, I can feel that. And so for me, that's what trauma therapy is about. It's about digging into that really hard stuff and rewriting it. And now when I run into, an employee that says, "Hey, I think I'm going to quit." I say, tell me more about that. And I no longer need to go into DEFCON 5 hide underneath my desk because I'm about to be abandoned again. The little part of me that like is worried about that, he still is like tapping on the shoulder like, "Are you sure this is okay?" And I'm like, "No, remember we had this conversation. Like you're good. Remember, you're good." And the person on the other end, they have no idea that I've even had any sort of anything going on because I'm now in a place of harmony with myself. So it's the long answer to the short question, but that's how trauma therapy rewrites your own personal automation. Because in a lot of ways, that's what like trauma writes subroutines into our bodies. Automation, subconscious automation that wreaks havoc on our relationships later in life.
Yes, I call it the subconsciousness. And I think that's where all these traumas are stored. And I mean, the worst part is we are not aware of most of what's going on in the subconscious mind because it's called subconscious for a reason, because, we don't know. And these routines can rule our lives in a very obstructive and destructive way without us even noticing. And that's why I believe that what you told us just now about trauma is super, super important, because, we can keep banging our head against the wall our entire lives without knowing that this wall was actually created somewhere in our childhood, and we are just not aware of it, but it's there. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. And I feel like we should write a freaking article below this video and give people, some options to actually engage in this kind of therapy, and what would be next, to actually uncover the potential.
Here's some
All
links
right.
that you can use to. That's not a bad idea. I can. So Perplexity is one of my favorite tools in the entire world.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Perplexity is amazing for this sort of thing. I'd probably just go to Perplexity and say, "Hey, it was just on a blog or a podcast episode. We talked a lot about trauma and therapy and EMDR and entrepreneurship. Can you write me a short list of resources for like how I would get started?" And the thing, I mean, and then you can just put a link to that Perplexity article because it'll write a better article than I could go find, and it'll do it in about 15 seconds. So
Cool. So you prefer Perplexity over ChatGPT?
ChatGPT has its place, and I have a subscription to both. They're both $20 a month. Everybody wants $20 a month. I'm just giving $20 a month away to all these tools. Crazy sauce. Perplexity replaced Google for me. I don't Google stuff anymore. I type it into Perplexity, and back comes data about what's there. Like I was talking to somebody earlier today about the whole Trump, everybody in office, all that kind of stuff. And he was talking about the cabinet that Trump's putting together, Elon Musk and all of these other people. And I said, tell me the whole cabinet and then score the cabinet, each cabinet member on how conservative they are. 100 being conservative, 1 being liberal. Because I wanted to see like how diverse is this group of people. And it was really fascinating to see like what it pulled back out and just how good a job it did at researching and consuming the data that it found online. And it takes a good 30 to 45 seconds. But I don't know about you. I can't read, 30, 40, 50 pages online in 30 to 45 seconds. I'm
No.
not that fast.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Perplexity is mind-numbingly
Yeah.
cool. I still use ChatGPT for, the conversations that it can have. The voice mode that it has is pretty amazing. But for my basic searches and troubleshooting on my computer and all of those sorts of things, I use Perplexity. ChatGPT did just release a feature called Search, so you can actually ask it to search, and it's trying to do the same thing that Perplexity is doing. They're nowhere near what Perplexity's actually got figured out. Will they catch up? I think they will to some degree or another. But pretty impressed with what I'm seeing in Perplexity right now.
Oh my God, you keep dropping all these, golden coins of wisdom. First we had how you replace yourself, how you find your opposite apprentice kind of thing. Then we learned about like treating our traumas. Now we learn about Perplexity. It's been amazing, man. It's been really amazing to speak with you.
I have to thank you. I don't think I've ever compared trauma to automation before. And that sounds like a chapter in my book. Like I'm writing a book called Automate, Delegate, Eliminate, and we're going to kind of dig into some of that. And I'm now wondering if my Automate, Delegate, Eliminate book shouldn't have an underlayer or a part 2 that talks about trauma in our lives and ADHD and a lot of that other stuff, because that's another big part of my journey. The reason I'm into automation is because I have ADHD and I hate doing things manually. I hate doing things manually. And so, yeah, like comparing it though, the trauma writes, like imagine if you had a gremlin inside you that would just randomly write automations that were harmful because it was trying to protect you from things that it no longer that were no longer actually bad. Like that's unaddressed trauma is a gremlin that's literally doing that.
Exactly. And it is automation. It is automated. It just runs on autopilot and it will never stop. And it is kind of cute because it wants to protect us. There's some kind of goodness underneath. Yeah. But it's completely outdated.
You should thank it. That's one thing I found is if you hate that, oh man, it knows you hate it and stand by because it ain't listening to you. Right? Yeah. So if you can come to that part of you that's trying to protect you and say, hey, look, buddy, really appreciate all the hard work you're doing here trying to firefight. Maybe we could use a little less water because you're drowning the flowers. Right? Like I get that you were worried about the flowers, but like pulling out a fire hose, like those flowers are never coming back. You blasted them into oblivion. These ones over here, could we use this watering can instead? Oh, okay. Like you mean we don't need it's not on fire anymore? No, it's not on fire anymore. But I swear I smelled smoke. Like
Yeah, that is a fantastic example. I think that's exactly how it works. There's this little gremlin who means well, but he lives in the past.
Honestly, Dano, the worst part is he's a little Dano. Like he's a part of you at one point in your life, or a part of me at one point in my life that's stuck there because they faced some trauma.
Yeah, and then there's this thing called inner child, and that's another chapter. But hey, holy cow, man. This was amazing, Will. I really appreciate all these interesting insights. I think we can expand on quite a few of those further in the description. And I'm very certain that everybody who's still listening to this podcast is just as amazed as I am. And thank you, by the way. And we will stay in touch. We will put everything people need to get in touch with you under this video. Sounds good. And of course, we also will share some about your Entrepreneur's Apprentice, about SellerLabs, and whatever you find on Perplexity about trauma healing. We'll take it from here. And I would say thank you so much, Mr. Will.
Happy to be here. Happy to share. You said, hey, we're going to talk about when you're 10 years old. And I said, stand by, because this is about to get real.
It did, man. It did. And now you're muted. You're muted.
All right.
Now I hear. And now you're off and on and off. Now you're off
again, or is it good now? Is it bad now?
Right now is good. Right now is good.
Okay, I'm going to count to 20, and you tell me if it does it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We're going to have a bloopers reel for this episode because this is insane. I've never had this much issue with a microphone before in my entire life.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, counting to 20. I mean, we're recording, so that's good. Yeah,
we're doing it, man. We're doing it.
Yeah, that's a comedy out of this.
This has to have a bloopers reel at the end where we're like,
okay,
to an experienced podcaster. I'm just going to leave this thing on so people can be like, why the heck is he wearing 2 microphones? Or like, going for it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pick up where we left.
Not touching anything.
We are right now at 8 minutes and 40 seconds. So you mentioned SellerLabs and Entrepreneur's Apprentice. So
So that's the question. How much of that story did you actually get?
I did get it, but the volume was like super low, which I think I can adjust. Why don't I just do it again? Look, we can just do it again.
That'll save you so much time.
I know. Yes, maybe. I know. You know. I know too.
Hey, here's the deal. Ask me the question again so it's a clean ask.
Okay. So we'll just start from scratch. Shall we?